I don't know if you saw, but this news came out today, but the Chinese landed a probe on the far side of the moon, and it had some plant seeds in it. I think cotton plants, and one of them is germinated. And so
I did see this under the headline, "A Giant Leaf for Mankind."
That's a good
which I thought
pun.
was great.
That is
but
a good pun.
I didn't think the actual story was that big of a deal.
Well, it's the first time we've grown plants on another body.
So
I think that's a pretty giant leap.
Leaf. But we've grown them in space. We've grown them on the space station.
Yeah, sure.
It was the same thing. Growing it in a box in space.
But it isn't the same thing because it's putting it on a body and putting it on a satellite. It has to travel so much further, and then it goes through so many different areas where an error could occur, being so far away as well, and with not under human supervision as well, on the far side of the moon that never faces Earth, so it has to bounce its signal up into another satellite and send it back, and then we can still grow a plant there. I think that is an achievement, and the fact that the Chinese have done it is really astonishing. It means that they're world first in some areas of space exploration. Have I convinced you?
No, I don't. No, you haven't. Not at all.
Fine. I've been doing a bit of indoor gardening.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, my brother for Christmas got me a little herb garden. It's quite sophisticated though. It's got like hydroponics, UV light hood and everything.
That does sound good. What have you got growing in there?
Well, you have to use these specific little pods to grow herbs. You can't just sprinkle seeds in, which was annoying when I worked that out. I don't think my brother knew that either. But it came with 5 pods, and I've got some thyme going, some basil, some mint. I think there's 2 different basils, 2 different thymes, I think. So yeah, they're like little coffee pods almost with long...
Okay, yeah, I was going to say, what size crop are we talking about?
Oh, well, they start off very small, but they can get really large, and the hood, you can just raise the hood as they grow, and I think you're supposed to be able to sustain the plants for ages. I don't want to put a time frame on it, but as long as you keep cutting it and trimming it and keeping it quite low, it will just spread out and out. So yeah, that should be nice to have some fresh herbs in the kitchen.
Lovely, yeah.
So you're reading World War Z at the moment, aren't you?
World War Z, yes.
Are you calling it World War Z?
Yeah, but I realised I said World War Z when I was speaking to you earlier, so I can't really defend that point.
I think that's probably how you're supposed to pronounce it.
World War Z?
World War Z.
Yeah, me too, but...
I know we say Z, but it's an American book.
It rhymes with 3, yeah. That's the point, isn't it?
I didn't get that. I didn't get that at all. That does make sense, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm enjoying it. When you said that each chapter was written from the perspective of a different person, I was expecting a little bit more narrative per person.
What do you mean?
It's a story told in snapshots, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's good.
So you're pleased that it's in snapshots?
No, I'm not pleased that it's in snapshots.
Okay.
I think that I would enjoy a proper book more.
Mm.
You know, the longest that anybody's story is like 6 pages.
There's a couple of longer ones later on.
Okay.
I liked how it was broken up. How far are you into it?
Like 4 chapters or something.
Oh,
Nearly
right.
halfway.
Oh, is that halfway?
Yeah.
Okay. I finished my 2018 reading list with War and Peace.
Oh.
Yeah, which was a bit of a slog in places.
Yeah.
A very epic book. It's almost 1,000 pages, and it's got tiny typeface. But I'm really glad I read it.
Well, yeah, it's one of the big ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not going to.
No, you'd hate it.
Yeah, thought so.
Yeah. As you know, I don't think I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but I track the books I read in a spreadsheet.
I didn't know that.
Yes, you did. I've shown it to you before.
Okay.
Just to keep an eye on like what I've read, what I thought, how long it takes me to read a book. I think it's good to have that kind of data, you know?
Yeah.
Do you want to see it? Do you want to see my spreadsheet?
I'll have a look at your spreadsheet. Yeah, I'm sure I've never seen this before.
All right, okay. I thought I'd shared it with you.
Access denied.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, maybe you haven't had this then. All right. Anyone with the link can view. There you go.
Oh, okay. Oh, so, okay. Yeah. You started it last year then, did you?
Yeah, I started it January 2018.
American Psycho, I agree, as rubbish. I wouldn't have
Yeah.
even given it a 4. Don't think I finished it.
Yeah, it is rubbish.
Oh, Jurassic Park, I've read.
I gave that a 9.
Yeah, it is good.
I can't remember giving that a 9. Because when I think back on it, I don't think I enjoyed it as much as clearly I did. At the time, I found it really absorbing. I read it really quickly, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've got some statistics. So in 2018, I read 34 books, 18 fiction, 16 non-fiction, which I thought was a nice split. Over 10,500 pages, which I think sounds bananas. That's a lot of page turns, isn't it?
That's a lot of page turns, yeah.
I wonder how much of my year was spent just turning pages. It could be in the hours.
I doubt that.
How long do you think it would take you to turn 10,500 pages?
Well, you don't have to turn 10,500, do you?
Why not?
Well, you turn half as many as that because they're printed on both sides and you have 2 pages open at once.
You're right.
So it's only 5,000. And also, do I think it takes more than, I don't know, less than a second to turn a page, yeah? Less than a second?
Yeah, probably, yeah.
Well, then no, it's not in the hours.
All right, but it's a lot of minutes.
I don't even know whether it's in the hours. I'd need a calculator to figure that out. 5,000 divided by, times 0.5, let's say. So divided by 2. So 2,500.
Divided by 60.
Yeah, it's only 41 minutes.
That's a long time to just turn pages. But yeah, all right, fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't consider that you don't turn every page, but yeah. But I also thought for the listeners, I'll just do a little review of my top books that I would recommend.
Okay, yeah, that'd be nice. I could have done this if you'd have told me to.
Sorry, I should have asked you to, shouldn't I?
I actually couldn't because I give away all of the books that I actually enjoyed and end up with a shelf full of books that, I thought were all right. Some of them, but okay.
Yeah, I get that. But the top books, the ones that I rated 10 out of 10, were An Astronaut's Guide to Life on Earth by Chris Hadfield, who was one of the commanders on the International Space Station. Really interesting book about just how being an astronaut or trying to achieve the goals that an astronaut needs to achieve can help you in everyday life. And I don't usually like self-help books, but I thought it was really interesting, particularly because you learn so much about what life is like on the ISS as well. So my second book that I rated 10 out of 10 was The Odyssey by Homer, the second oldest book in the world. Really enjoyable, absolute classic. I think it's just a brilliant story and anybody would enjoy it.
Okay.
And the final book was Into Thin Air by John Krakeur, which I read in about 24 hours. I was so into it. It's about a fateful expedition to Everest, and he was a journalist sent to go to the summit and just document what it was like. And it happened to coincide with a period of terrible weather, and in fact, loads of people died. There were lots of events. It was an absolute page turner. I couldn't finish it fast enough. I loved it.
Sounds very interesting, yeah.
So those are my 3 top books. I'll include links in the description for anybody who wants to buy those.
Excellent.
Do you know what time it is?
It is 10 to 8.
No, it isn't. You've got that wrong, my friend. It's actually time for Dinosaur.
Oh.
So there have been quite a few dinosaur discoveries across the world over the past month. So I found it very hard to choose one for this episode. But in the end, I've gone for, are you ready for this? First time?
Yeah, let's go.
Saltriovenator zanellai.
Well, I don't believe that was the first time you tried to say that.
That is actually the first time I've tried to say that out loud.
Okay. Well done.
But in my notes, I broke it down into phonetics.
Yeah, I always do that, and I can still never do it.
I think I got it slightly wrong, actually. Saltriovenator zanellai. It's Zanellai. So I think that would end in lie. Zanellai. I'll pop it in the show notes so you can have a go at home.
Okay.
So this is a species that was discovered fairly close to us geographically. It's a European dinosaur.
Okay, lovely.
Yeah, I think that's our first one on this show. The fossils were found in Italy. It was a large predator, which is nice. We tend to have, big sauropods. They tend to be the ones that are discovered quite often. But this was a 20-foot-long carnivore from the very early Jurassic, actually right near the border of the Triassic. And the discovery is interesting because Saltriovenator seems to predate what we believed were the earliest big meat-eating dinosaurs, like Allosaurus, for example, by about 25 million years.
Okay.
The Tyrannosaurids, for example, were in the Cretaceous, and I guess the big meat eaters that preceded those, we thought that they emerged around the mid-Jurassic, not the very early Jurassic. So this kind of pushes the timeline back for them. A couple of things that I really liked about this as well. The discovery of the fossils was actually made in 1996. But before you groan.
Okay.
They were found in a quarry near the Swiss border, where a lot of it was fragmented in a dynamite explosion. And because of that, it's taken paleontologists more than 20 years to reconstruct the skeleton and categorise it.
Oh, that sounds like such a lot of hard work, actually. I guess it's 20 foot long, so...
25 foot.
25 foot long, yeah. A 25-foot puzzle for 20 years.
Yeah. But imagine starting working on that in 1996, and then this month, your new dinosaur was announced.
Well, I'm sure they were doing other things.
Yeah, that's true. Nobody was working on that full time, surely. The other thing that I found really interesting about this was how much you can tell about the fossil's particular experience in life and death. So they know or estimate that the specimen was around 24 years old when it died, which I think is really specific.
It is very specific.
And that's apparently not a fully grown specimen. And it somehow ended up in the sea, perhaps via a river after death, or maybe during death. Maybe it drowned.
It's going to have to be a strong river carry a 25-foot dinosaur down it.
I don't know. Bodies float, don't they? So it might have been okay. Once it's full of gas or something, it might have been a very strong river. You never know. But they know this because there's marks on its bones to suggest that its body was fed on by sharks and other sea creatures like urchins and marine worms.
Oh.
It's the first example of a dinosaur skeleton that has evidence of this many sea creatures feeding on it. So welcome, Saltriovenator, to the fossil record. Great to have you on board.
Animal intelligence is something that we've talked about a couple of times, yeah? Talking whales, self-aware fish quite recently.
Yeah.
And one of the most famously intelligent animals has been in the news this week. The New Caledonian crow.
The New Caledonian crow? Is that just the standard crow?
Well, no, it's a crow from New Caledonia.
Yeah, all right, but
it's a very standard one. When you hear that crows can do something, it's often the New Caledonian crow that they've actually used.
Is that right? It's not just the crows that we'd be familiar with from our day-to-day lives?
Well, they use those as well. It depends where they are.
All right.
But they are famous in the behavioural ecology literature.
Okay.
Much like yourself.
Where is New Caledonia?
In the Americas, I think. Hang on.
I don't know where Old Caledonia is. Caledonia.
All right, Dad.
Well, presumably there was an old one. An original one.
Well, it's a French territory, so I'm guessing France. It's off the coast of Australia.
Okay, cool.
I'm going to have to drop my notes.
Oh, dear.
The crow...
Sorry, can I just say...
Yeah.
I've just Googled where Caledonia is, the original Caledonia.
Yeah.
It's the Latin name given by the Romans to the land in today's England and Scotland.
Oh, there we go. Then maybe we should have known that.
We probably should have known that, shouldn't we?
Yeah, we can cut that out. Then I won't be exposed for thinking that New Caledonia was by America.
I like that we learned that. I'm going to leave that in.
So the crows belong to the family Corvidae, the corvids, along with the ravens, rooks, jays, jackdaws, magpies, and some others.
Mm-hmm.
Very familiar birds.
They are, yeah.
And the group as a whole is quite remarkable for its intelligence. They have a very high brain-to-body weight ratio. So I thought I'd cover a few of the interesting crow abilities before we get to the new discovery.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah. So apparently crows can recognise human phases and have been shown to act negatively towards humans who've wronged them in the past.
Wow, so they can remember villains.
Yeah, but not only this, they can pass the information on to other crows.
So a crow that's never interacted with let's call them villains, with a villain, can still be prejudiced against them because their mate told them.
That's exactly right. So some American researchers used let's call it a villain mask, when trapping and ringing birds. So obviously that got them all agitated. And soon after, anybody wearing the mask would get scolded by 26% of the crows. But then they just left the mask to one side, didn't use it for anything bad. And 15 months later, it had gone up to 30% of the crows going mad at him.
Oh, they've been talking.
And 3 years later, 66% of the crows were reacting badly to him.
What?
Yeah,
That's
so
bananas. How would a bird communicate to its peers a mask?
well, by squawking when the mask was back.
Yeah, I know. No, that absolutely makes sense. But I mean,
That's my hypothesis.
take a bird away from the mask. Take a bird that's never seen the mask before, and a bird that has had a bad experience with the mask. Put them together and then show them the mask. Would the bird that's never seen it before be like prejudiced against it?
No, but the bird who'd seen it before would be, yeah.
But the other one would have to learn.
Yeah, or it might just start doing it anyway. You know what birds are like. Have you ever been in a pet shop?
Yeah.
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 That's birds.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm not slagging off birds. We're talking about the great skills.
Yeah, sorry, go on. Yeah.
So ravens that were set complex problems for rewards that could only be solved by cooperation between multiple birds were shown to ostracize individuals that cheated. So they're doing a little reward for, I think it was like pulling sticks for a bit of cheese, but where both of them had to perform the action. And if one of the crows stole the other crow's piece of cheese, then they were just like, no, not working with you anymore. Which is, quite impressive, yeah?
Just holding a grudge.
Yeah. Something that's not grudge related, maybe. New Caledonian crows can also understand water displacement.
Oh, I get that. So I bet I can see how they do an experiment with that. They'd probably have a seed in the bottom of a bottle or something, and then they'd give the crow some mechanism to fill the bottle up with water so that they can access the seed.
Not quite, but
okay.
They don't have to operate a hose.
I didn't mean that.
So the bottle's got water and a treat in it, and then they've got stones to put in the bottle to get the water to the top.
To get the water higher, of course, yes.
Yeah, they do a very similar challenge quite often on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. It's like a little not proper bush tucker trial. For
the birds in the jungle or the contestants.
That's quite outdated language, Harvey. But yeah, sorry. The crows can do it in quite a nuanced way, actually. So they can look at a set of problems in front of them, like a set of bottles of water with different amounts of water in them, for example. And they can actually understand which will be the easiest to displace. Which will be the easiest to get the reward. And they do that one first, which is something that's quite complex thought, yeah? Yeah.
So they can analyse two scenarios and go for the one that's going to give the easiest reward.
Yeah, without giving it a go. And possibly most famously, crows can use tools and create their own tools. So tool use, depending on how you define it, happens in like quite a lot of groups, but getting a little twig and poking it in a tree hole and eating grubs or whatever, that's nothing compared to what crows can do.
What can a crow do?
It can manufacture novel compound tools using different pieces.
What do you mean by that?
If, the first stick wasn't long enough, it could put two sticks together to get the reward or whatever. Whereas no other animals, like even chimpanzees and monkeys and stuff, they have trouble getting them to figure that out. Like creating compound... Well, if you think about how long it took us.
Me and you?
Well, no, not us personally. I mean, you can talk about humans developmentally, but when we figured out that a piece of stone on a wooden handle was better as an axe than just a stone, that was a big leap, yeah?
Yeah, we were riding that technological innovation for thousands of years.
Yeah.
Tens of thousands.
And the crows are as well.
That's hilarious. Yeah, and now look at us.
I know, now look at us. There was even a study showing that when you train a crow to get a reward for a certain sized paper token, if you don't give it the right sized paper, it can figure out that it can just rip it to size and use that.
Oh, forgery.
Well, I would call them a corvid counterfeiter. For the alliteration, you see.
Yeah, there's your suggestion for the episode title, I see.
So that's all pretty impressive, though. You'd agree.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. I also think they can speak, can't they?
Yeah, well, they hold funerals for the dead to help understand danger. Fascinating creatures. I only wrote down a couple of things that I was interested in.
But they can mimic human voice, can't they? They can say words.
Well, yeah, but you know that I'm not that impressed by that because no animals can do it very well.
Okay, yeah, fine. Fine.
This week, scientists unveiled a new skill for the new Caledonian crow to do with their ability to infer weight. So if you looked at an object, how would you decide how heavy it was?
Oh, that's really hard.
Well, yeah, it is.
That's really hard. You know, the amount of times that I've looked at something and been like, I wonder if that's heavy, and lifted it up to test. Okay, at a basic level, I'd look at its size, I'd look at what material I think it's made out of, if it's a container, what I think it's containing, and then, yeah, my real test would be to pick it up and test the weight with my muscles.
Yeah. What I will say is that obviously we live as humans, in quite complex environments. Things look a lot more like how much they might weigh in nature.
Yeah, like a pebble.
Yeah.
Compared to another pebble. Okay, I'd look at its size and its shape.
And then you'd pick it up if you wanted it. But the crows can do it without picking it up. There's a specific way they do it, but I don't think you're going to guess it, so I'll tell you. Basically, they can use the effect of the wind on the object to infer how heavy it is.
Only to a certain extent, though. Only if the object is affected by the wind.
Yeah.
Most things with mass aren't affected by a normal wind, right?
Most things that are light enough for a crow to pick up might be.
Yeah, okay.
So, I mean, obviously this was a test done in the lab. Like, this was a scientific experiment to see if crows could understand the cause and effect of wind. They were trained to receive a reward, as they usually are, by putting an object in a plastic tube. And half of the crows would get a reward if they used a heavy object, and half of them if they used a light object.
Mm-hmm.
So once you've trained up all the crows, they were then presented different objects, like novel objects, but attached to strings and being blown by a fan. I love a science story that includes a fan.
Yeah, you do.
73% of the time, the crows went to the object that they were trained for, so the light ones if they were light trained, the heavy ones if they were heavy trained for, first, indicating that they'd worked out which one was heavier based on how it moved in the wind, in the breeze.
That is clever.
Yeah.
My initial thought, I mean, yeah, great, some more evidence of crows being super intelligent, but I do think it only sounds extraordinary because of the context that we mentioned, or that you brought up, that most things that a crow picks up are affected by the wind, and for us, most things that we would pick up probably aren't, because they've got more mass. And I think if we were that small and our objects were that we were picking up were affected by the wind, we would use that, and it would just be a thing like...
It. What are you talking about? When I see a plastic bag drifting through the wind, I don't think, that must be heavy. That must have a lot of change in it.
Yeah, all right, we do use that, yeah. Okay, yeah, fine.
I wasn't saying that crows could do it and we couldn't.
No, of course we do that. I don't know why I thought we didn't, actually. Yeah, it's my turn to look like a fool. After the erect horse debacle.
Stand by that.
Episode 15, nose time. Yeah, okay, all right, yeah. All right, it's cool. It's good.
Yeah, it's cool.
Good. It doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. Well, what do you think of it as a skill, though? Do you think it's a useful skill, useful in nature?
Absolutely, yeah. Being able to work out how heavy something is really useful. I think it's really useful. I don't think it's as useful as the tool construction thing that they do. I think that's a little bit more impressive.
Yeah.
And
Well.
and also the being able to teach other crows about a threat or whatever.
What might make it more impressive, though, is that all of those things that you've said, though, well, primates can do. I mean, I know that we can do the wind thing, but
Non-human primates, gorillas, chimpanzees, orangutans.
yeah, no, they can't do it. But there's been criticism of the studies where they tested the ability to do it in the primates. Like, this is quite a simple setup, and as we said, like, it is quite ecologically relevant to a crow. Maybe perhaps more ecologically relevant than it is to a big chimpanzee or something like that. You know, maybe in an equivalent, I don't know what an equivalent test would be like, because why would they learn that?
Well, why did we?
Well, we're just really clever, aren't we? There was actually...
That's such a lazy answer. Well,
It's
we're just
true.
really clever, aren't we?
We've figured out so much stuff that we don't need to figure out.
Yeah, so we figured that out sort of accidentally.
I don't know why we figured it out.
Hmm.
There was a hypothesis for how the crows did it, though, on the Daily Mail comments section. Somebody said, that's because they have a genetic memory of watching swaying corpses of hanged murderers on gibbets. Would that they were doing it these days.
Have you seen Waterworld?
Waterworld, one of Stoke-on-Trent's leading attractions, indoor water park.
No, Waterworld, the movie starring Kevin Costner.
No.
No, me neither. But the basic premise is that the polar ice caps have melted and sea levels have risen to the point that there's no land anywhere on Earth. So everyone has to live on the water in like boats or floating communities. We hear a lot about rising sea levels and how this will affect communities around the world, don't we, nowadays?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
Yeah, something like 10% of all people live on the coastline or in low elevation areas. So rising sea levels will have serious implications for, among other things, agriculture, for example, like growing crops. So how are we going to deal with that, Adam?
Well, Harvey, as you well know, they can do it on the moon now, so I don't think they'll have any trouble on the water.
Yeah, well, perhaps what we've learnt on the moon we'll be able to apply down here. We don't need to go to the moon, though, to look for a solution. We need only look to Bangladesh. What do you know about Bangladesh?
Very poor.
Yeah, think of the third world country,
Yeah.
poor, yeah. It's also a very wet country.
Oh, yeah, floods. Yeah, terrible flooding. It's part of the problem, isn't it?
Well, it's home to the world's largest river delta, the Ganges Delta, and it gets hit by lots of tropical storms and obviously monsoons in monsoon season. So the result of that is that it very often floods, and the worst floods can affect 3/4 of the entire country.
Yeah.
3/4 of the country just flooded. That's absolutely bonkers. Essentially, when you see images like drone footage, it's just these little pathways. Their fields are essentially just big pools of water. But clearly the Bangladeshis are in need of an agricultural solution when their land is so flooded. How do they grow crops?
Yeah.
So the BBC have put together a short video, it's about 3 minutes long, showing what I think is an ingenious solution to this problem. So farmers in the region build these floating farms which resemble big green mats of vegetation. And because they float on the water, they just rise and fall with the changing water level. I'll show you the video. You don't need to watch the full thing, but
Yeah.
I think they look really lush and clean and green. I just want to lie on one, really. But I will show you. You'll disagree. You'll be like, oh, it's disgusting.
What are they growing?
Yeah, that's a good question. They grow all sorts of crops in them. I don't actually have a list of species at hand, but I've seen them grow things like melony cucumbery things. That's in the video, which is quite cool, I guess.
Yeah.
Have you got the video?
There we go.
So you see they can transport them around by punting them along the riverbed. Well,
Yeah.
not a river, is it really? The delta bed.
So what are they made of?
So it doesn't explicitly show how he makes them, the particular farmer that they feature in this video, but I think they're hyacinth plants put together. They're like constructed in a way matted together, yeah, constructed in a way that I guess keeps,
because it says it's an ancient technique,
yeah,
that they're expanding.
There must be some degree of complexity to them, because keeping the mat of vegetation all held together, especially when you're punting it along as well, you know, you're actually exposing it to the flow of water. You also have to ensure the roots of the crops aren't completely submerged, I'm assuming, because that is generally not a good thing. Like the roots will rot. So it seems that there's like a body of vegetation on the bottom that separates from the soil, if you will.
Well, yeah, that's what it looks like, isn't it? It looks like a big mat of dead, decomposing stuff covered in live crops. But I would think that at the bottom of I mean, I have no idea. This is mindless speculation, but I would think there was some sort of wooden frame or something, maybe.
Ah, that's a good shout. Perhaps there is. I haven't seen that. And you don't see that in the video. You do see him sort of tying some hyacinth plants together. The actual crops are planted in like little balls of soil, very similar to the pods in my hydroponics unit. And I think the decomposing vegetation below creates great fertilizer.
Yeah.
So the crops do really well. And it shows you in the video that people travel from miles around to come and get their crops, because they're apparently like the best crops you can find. I suppose they're probably quite scarce as well when during the flooding seasons.
Yeah.
The video is really good. I've got a few questions about them. You know, I'd like to know how they're built. If there is a wooden frame under there, that would be interesting to know. But I'm not sure if you know this, but we actually have our own floating farms here in Europe as well. Did you know this?
No.
So last year, an offshore dairy, which uses robots to milk the cows, it's automated, it began operating in Rotterdam.
Doesn't this just scream of like, oh, we don't want to know about all this bad stuff, so we're sick of even having it on land. Let's just put it on the ocean where we don't have to look at it. Just if you're that bothered about it, don't have milk.
Yeah, that's true. I agree with that. Lots of people do choose not to have milk.
Yeah, I don't have milk really. Well, I do.
That's not an ethical choice, though, is it? I've seen you dip a whole baguette into a big old camembert before.
Well, yeah, that's delicious.
But anyway, it's quite cool, regardless of what your dietary preferences are, that there's this farm offshore in the Netherlands. Because not only is it making use of space that's being underutilized, but it also means that the food doesn't have to travel so far to end up on somebody's dinner plate, or in the case of milk, end up in a glass, I guess.
But it's not free floating, is it, this farm?
I think it is free floating, yeah.
But
it's a floating farm, yeah.
But surely they've got some sort of an anchor.
Well, it's probably anchored, sure, but just being anchored doesn't mean you're not floating.
No, I can concede that, yeah, because you can always put a couple more links in the chain if sea levels rise.
Yeah. Or, you know, I guess it's probably built to...
Well, you'd have the chain a bit loose, but, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Doing my research on this, I dug up an article from quite a few years ago, which had a concept by a design firm in Barcelona for a 2 million square foot farming barge with 3 core layers. On the top of the barge, you'd have solar panels, which would power the farm. On the middle, you'd have hydroponics to grow fruits and vegetables. And on the bottom, you'd have a fish farm using in situ conditions to maintain a population of fish for farming.
Yeah, that sounds pretty. So, like, the bottom would be like a cage.
Yeah, I think you could probably say that, yeah. So it doesn't need to filter the water, really, because all the fish are...
We're just putting it in the sea.
Yeah.
A lot of fish in the sea already.
And the barge could also make use of wind and wave energy to generate more power, as well as the solar power. I think it sounds really cool, and there's some concept art that I'll share with you.
Yeah, the moving about bit part, is that good?
What do you mean moving about?
I guess it wouldn't move about though, it would be. Okay, yeah.
I think you'd probably want it to be fairly stationary.
It's a lot more low profile than I was expecting, actually.
Really?
Well, actually, I guess you don't know the scale, really, do you? But yeah, it looks good. I'm pretty sure we've got floating stuff, haven't we?
Yeah, we got boats, I think.
Yeah, so the idea of the floating farm is good because take up less space on land. Is that it?
Take up less space on land means you don't have to transport. So we could pop one of these offshore, very nearby a coastal city, and then all of the people in that city, it's very good for the environment, for their food to just travel from the harbour to them, as opposed to from a farm miles and miles away in the countryside, or even in another country in many instances. So it's really good for the environment. It's also, also gives you another dimension to play with. You've got the water for fish, you've got the farm on top, and also all that open space for collecting solar, wind, and wave energy.
Would the fish be all right with it? I guess
What do you
you've got
mean?
lights for the plants anyway.
They might be peeved.
You know, it seems a huge waste to have solar panels to power some lights for some plants underneath. Just take the panels off. Why does it need to be solar powered, really? It's just some soil on a platform, cage underneath, make it float.
I like your low-tech approach, but the power would be going to not just the hydroponic system. For example, it needs fresh water, and it needs that to be pumped around, but also for, I guess, the lights on board and the microwaves for the workers and all of all of the facilities. I know that was a really random example.
Yeah.
But you do see what I mean?
Yeah, I see what you mean.
It needs electricity. And also, yeah, it does make sense to make use of natural sunlight, but also in a country like Britain, we don't get that much natural sunlight.
We get enough grow plants.
Yeah, but not to grow them really, really quickly.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Like, actually, probably an indoor thing for growing plants would be better because then you can control the conditions completely. But it seems that it's strange that you're going for that for the plants and then a completely open door approach with the fish.
Well, you're assuming that it's an open door approach, but they might not need much in the way of control. Perhaps there would be a way to speed up their development. And in fact, I think that would probably be done in the lab. I think we have a good understanding of the salmon genome. In like fish farms, we've selectively bred them to grow a lot quicker, larger, juicier, tastier. Yeah. So there would be that sort of thing at play. Perhaps there would be some sort of filtration system. Perhaps there would be some sort of lighting for the fish that benefits the fish, or something. I don't know. But I think that the basic plan is it's difficult to farm fish. Stick them underneath this barge, and you get two for the price of one.
How do you listen to your music?
What do you mean, like app or hardware?
Well, yeah, if you use an app, like
Spotify. I use.
Yeah. Okay. So the question was like, do you stream it or do you listen to it on, a CD, whatever?
Yeah, I stream it.
Would you ever buy a CD though?
No. Although for Christmas I got Bella a record player with some old records.
Ah, well, that's very related to this story. I'll ask you why you did that a bit later.
Okay. Cool.
So I was about to say that what we might have thought of as obsolete formats are having a bit of a comeback. 2018 was actually a very good year for it, though. So apparently cassette tape sales in the United States went up 19%.
19?
Yeah, like cassette tapes, like we used to have when, don't really know how to describe it. It's like a little box that you put.
A little box, yeah, full of tape.
It's like a tiny little VHS.
It was, but again, obsolete tech.
Yeah. So they're up to around 120,000 cassette tapes sold a year now, which is nothing compared to the heyday, but, a lot better than they were doing.
Yeah.
And even older technology, vinyl, as you were mentioning, is doing very well, especially for its age. So vinyl sales last year increased 12%, apparently, to 9.7 million records sold. That was in America. Apparently, in the UK, we sold about 4 million records. And since 2007, the amount of vinyl sales has increased by 1,500%.
Wow.
Okay, I was hoping for a bit of a reaction.
Sorry, did you not hear me say wow?
Yeah, I heard you say wow.
Okay.
I mean, well, you can tell me why you bought it. Why do you think people buy them? Is there any good reason for it?
Yeah, there's a few reasons I thought it was. There is the nostalgia element, although, of course, for me, that doesn't matter so much because I didn't grow up with records. I grew up with cassette tapes, and I don't see the appeal with them really, and CDs as well.
Yeah.
And a brief period of mini discs that very fleeting.
Oh, well, and you had your Walkman, which is
I did have
a lot
Walkman.
closer to the current system that we use.
Yeah.
Digital.
Yeah, I guess that's true. But I bought the record player because, well, two reasons really. I think it's really nice when you have an artist that you like. It's really nice to own some of their art as a physical medium.
Yeah.
It's nice to have the record. You know, for example, I got Bella David Bowie's Hunky Dory, which is a really, really good David Bowie album that we both really love. And it's just nice to have that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's nice to have that palpable element to a piece of art.
Yeah.
And of course, with streaming services that we have nowadays, whenever you listen, I don't know if you do this, but I tend to just go to the artist and find a greatest hits playlist, or just go on their top 5 songs, and then it goes through some random ones after that.
Yeah, well, it depends. Yeah, it depends what I'm in the mood for. I will often just go for a playlist as well.
Yeah, a playlist. But I feel like over time we've lost the concept of the album.
Yeah.
And the album is what artists put together. They put their tracks together in a certain order. I think you're supposed to listen to that album with the tracks in that order so that you can experience what they want you to experience. And I think that with streaming services, we've lost that.
But I think that also there's a variation in that among music as to how much that is going to give you. Like if you listen to, I don't know what, the Cheeky Girls' debut album, Party Time, I think you can listen to on shuffle and still get a similar sort of feeling.
Yeah, sure. But I think for some albums, it's good to listen to each track in order, the order that it was intended. Yeah. I don't think the Cheeky Girls were the pinnacle of musical innovation.
Well,
but I know for a fact, for example, Pink Floyd, which is not a band that I'm particularly into, but I know that their albums are very meticulously put together, so that in fact the tracks blend into one another on Dark Side of the Moon.
So it's not to do with quality, you don't think?
So that was my first point, sorry. I know that was a long point and maybe there was a couple of points in there, but my second point is quality. And it's not necessarily that the quality is better, it's that it's a different type. And it sounds, again, going back to the way that albums are ordered, it sounds the way, particularly if you're listening to music from the period where that was the standard model, it was going to be put on a record, it sounds the way the artist intended it to sound. And you do get that different sound to a spinning disc. You can hear it, and there's something in it. And listening to David Bowie's Life on Mars, for example, it does sound different when you stream it than when you listen to it on a record. And it's nice. There's a niceness about listening to it on a record.
Yeah, but because our mutual friend Ben also got a record player for Christmas. Mm-hmm. So I asked him why he thought it was any good, and he said the same things as you, exactly, that he likes to have a physical copy of music that means a lot to him, and that the sound quality as well, he said better, but yeah, better is subjective in this, in terms of the actual bit rate or whatever. Obviously we've got better at recording and playing music. Although I would say that isn't there some sort of, I don't want to say it, a guilt that in 2019 this having the physical copy thing, when we're all supposed to be sustainable and all that.
Yeah, so you mean just buy less physical media? Yeah, I agree with that. That's definitely true. It's a luxury item. We've only got 3 records. We might get some more. I hope we get some more, but it's not going to be a regular thing. I don't want stacks and stacks and stacks of records. I just want a few of the albums or singles that mean the most to Bella and I.
Yeah, and then the rest of it you can stream on Spotify.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, perhaps you might change your mind with this news.
Are you going to tell me that it's cheaper to produce a record than it is to stream the songs in terms of energy used?
Well, yeah, I am eventually. I am. So it's a more delicate balancing act than you may have thought before you guessed what this story was. According to research from Music Tank in a report that they very cleverly called The Dark Side of the Tune.
Yeah.
I love that.
That's very good.
So your average modern day vinyl record contains about 135 grams of PVC and has a physical carbon footprint of 500 grams, like the actual amount of carbon involved in making the PVC.
Yeah.
Possibly even more, worse than this probably is the plasticizers that are in it, which make it a bit more flexible, right? So they don't just shatter, which can leach out into landfill and, remain for longer than the landfill's around. So not completely negligible impacts. As a little side note, I found a little bit of entomology.
Yeah.
Did you know that records were originally made from shellac?
Oh, is that the casing of beetles?
Well, it's a resin that female lac bugs make.
Oh, okay. So not actually made out of the beetles, but something they produce.
Which has actually got a lower carbon footprint than PVC, as you might guess. But that was brittle. So records just smashed all over the place. But on the positive side of vinyl, once you've bought it, the only carbon cost that you're going to incur is from running the record player, which is, negligible. And same for tapes, same for CDs. Now, the formats we use are material free, yeah?
Yes, well, yeah.
It's just data. It's just an electronic file that gets sent to your phone or whatever you're playing it on.
Your device, yeah.
Yeah. But, of course, those files have to be stored on servers, which use energy. And the servers have to be cooled by big fans that use energy. And it has to be transmitted across a big network into your router, which uses energy, and sent to your device, which uses energy.
Sometimes sent to a Bluetooth device as well from your device to be played.
I mean, the whole sending over the network thing probably takes a million more steps than I skipped over, all using energy as well. So have a guess how many times you would have to stream an album for it to be more energetically efficient to make a CD instead.
I'm going to say 1,000 times.
No. You only need to listen to an album 27 times for it to be more energetically efficient for you to have made it on a CD than to stream it.
That is absolutely bonkers.
So what you were saying, and what our friend Ben said, is that, you get the albums that mean a lot to you, you get the special ones. That's the exact thing that you should be doing.
Yeah, because those are the ones you play most.
I mean, I don't know about you. I'm one of those people who, I use Apple Music, not Spotify, but I rarely actually download the file to my phone.
Yeah, I just stream them. I almost always have Wi-Fi, and I have so much data on my phone as well. My data allowance every month is ridiculous. It's like something I'd never use.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I never worry about streaming.
Exactly. I mean, I just thought that was what was meant to be done. But even if you stored it on your phone, it would take so much less energy. You wouldn't be incurring a cost every time you played it, or, not as big a cost anyway. You would cut out so many steps in the chain. So, I don't know. I think a good micro action that all of our listeners could do is, we could take the top 100 songs in there, whatever. There isn't an easy way to sort in Spotify. That's the problem, is there?
No.
By plays. In Apple Music, you can sort by how often you play it.
Yeah, and then save them to your device.
Yeah.
Hard to do if you've got an iPhone.
Why is that?
Because those babies get full up week 1 when you buy one of them.
Yeah, but I mean, is it not worth it for the environment? I guess you could just buy a vinyl copy. Go back to vinyl.
I think that's a good point. I'm actually going to do that. I'm going to do that for Billy Joel, Elton John, and at the moment, Boney M.
Oh. Is that a hangover from Christmas?
It's not. I don't really like Mary's Boy Child so much, but I have just discovered Rah Rah Rasputin. And
I knew you were going to say that.
Well, that's a good one, isn't it? And
Well,
Sunny
yeah.
and Ma Baker, they're great songs.
Well, yeah, so download them.
You'll be making a real contribution to the environment, actually, wouldn't you?
If you've sat here and streamed this whole episode, well, I guess it's too late now.
Have you heard of a von Neumann probe?
No.
I would have been quite astonished if you had, actually, because this is hardcore space shit. So John von Neumann was a Hungarian-American mathematician and a computer scientist. He lived in the early half of the 20th century. Have you heard of him?
Yeah, I think I have. But maybe I'm confusing with John Bon Jovi.
This is John von Neumann.
Oh.
Not John Bon. John Bon Neumann. So he's got lots of achievements, one of which is he was the leader of the team who calculated the mathematics required for the development of the atomic bomb.
I mean, I'd prefer to have he was the leader of Bon Jovi, to be honest.
Well, it might have been more ethical, perhaps, but at the same time, quite an achievement.
Yeah, okay, it's good, yeah.
He came up with the concept for storing programs as software in computer memory, which laid down the architecture needed for the modern digital computer. So he was like very early on in the computer's development. I think when it was like vacuum tubes were powering them and stuff.
Ah.
So yeah, really important guy, generally regarded as the finest mathematician of his time. One of his other theories, and this is the one we'll focus on, was something he called the universal constructor, which is a self-replicating machine and he published this theory in a book titled The Theory of Self-Reproducing Automata.
Mm-hmm.
It's far too complicated for me to divulge into the nitty-gritty technical details, but the most important thing to understand is that the machine, which self-replicates, is both a component of replication as well as the storage for the blueprint, if you will, that regulates replication. So that's all controlled by the same machine. So it builds itself, and it also holds the data that says what itself should look like, or its copy should look like. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Now, we actually have physical applications of this technology today, like 3D printers, for example, that can print most of their own components. I don't think we have something that can print entirely its own components, replicate itself entirely. But something like a 3D printer making its own components is absolute child's play when you take this theory to where it can go. So when you apply it to something with lots of complexity, a field like robotics, for example, if you have these machines replicating enough, you'll start to see one machine make a copy of itself that has a slight error in it. Does that make sense? If you scale this up and you've got so many machines replicating themselves, and because that grows exponentially, because you're making another replicator, then that's making a replicator. Once you do that enough times on a grand scale, the blueprints will have errors in them so that each one is slightly different.
Yeah.
So that sounds familiar, right?
Well, it's evolution.
Exactly.
But I've been thinking that from the beginning. A self-replicating unit. But what has he invented?
Well, this is the thing. It's a non-biological system.
Well, he's just described the biological system, though, hasn't he?
Yeah, that is exactly what it is. But it's a non-biological system capable of self-replication with deviation from the parent copy that is then subject, by definition, to the laws of evolution. That's really interesting. Non-biological evolution, don't you think?
Well, yeah, but does such a thing exist?
Not yet.
No. Well, there we are then. I'm just trying to think of where the error... So obviously the error would be within the code that the machine uses to reprint itself, because it's got to be passed on through the code, yeah?
Yeah.
It's going to have to be a long code, isn't it? I don't know. Like, we managed to do it in DNA, so yeah, it's not impossible to create that code.
Exactly.
The code should arise naturally.
Exactly. Let's take this technology and see how it could be useful for space exploration. So imagine we have one of these robots that can replicate itself and improve via natural selection, if you will. Let's stick some wheels on it so it can rove around a planet. Let's stick some mining components on it so it can gather resources. And while we're at it, let's load some AI onto it, perhaps a little machine learning so it can get better and better at navigating its environment and reproducing, for example. So we've just built a really useful robot, yeah?
Yeah.
because we can send that to Mars or other bodies to build habitation facilities for humans, for example. And beyond that, we can use it to explore the galaxy. Like I say, self-replication is what bacteria or amoebas do. And when you have bacteria in a petri dish, first you have 1, then you have 2, then you have 4, then you have 8. The population grows exponentially, yeah? And that's what would happen with these robots. And that's what a von Neumann probe is, a self-replicating spacecraft that can explore the universe.
Ah, okay. That's interesting. A spacecraft is a way where I think that would be the way to do it, because when you were describing earlier how you would do it to like set up a human colony, for example, I was thinking, well, maybe a self-replicating robot with natural selection isn't the best thing there. What you want is something more like a colony of robots where one, like the queen reproduces and controls all of the drones. Because then, you can directly program that one from Earth or whatever. So they all have the same instinct.
Different roles. So you've got some a constructor robot, some a fixer. They'll go around and mend some of the others.
Yeah, because then you can have fewer, or you would just have fewer reproductive robots that would be safer. We would artificially create, in inverted commas, an environment where each robot could flourish, yeah? You'd want to protect your reproductive ones, just like they do the queen in a bee colony or something.
What do you mean reproductive ones? The ones that are designing the other robots?
Yeah, the soldiers don't reproduce. Because you would think there was a cost of, there definitely will be a cost of reproduction.
Yeah.
For a robot. It's got to get the parts from somewhere.
Well, yeah, that's why it's sort of mining for resources, and it's building from the resources it can find in wherever it is. The best thing about this is all the implications it brings up. So let's just take this probe. Forget building a colony, just one of these ones that we send out to explore the universe. Would you describe the probe as life? Follows the same process that life does. It consumes resources, uses them, ultimately for replication. Is it a form of life? What do you think?
I'm thinking. I guess it is. No.
No? Why not?
Well, like a computer virus. It's not alive, is it?
Is it not?
Well, it's self-replicating.
Yeah, is it not then?
Well, it just parasitizes the host. No, because the host isn't alive. All electrical things use energy. Using energy isn't a requirement to being alive. But I guess as soon as it builds itself for growth and repair.
Exactly. It's replicating itself. That's what life does. Life is about replication, about preserving our code, if you will. We're protecting our genes, yeah? The genes are what we are preserving, and we'll pass them down. The genes essentially have been around for billions of years. They're the things that we, as organisms, protect. And then we pass those down to another generation, and they carry those genes, and that's what it is. That's what life is. And that's just what these robots would be doing. They'd be protecting their own code. It might change over time through evolution, just like DNA does. So what happens when you introduce AI to this evolution? We're no longer in control of what the robot's learning. It's not like we're programming it. So what if it gets super smart? What if it works out through intelligence or evolution that, for example, sexual reproduction is better than self-replication? And it does, sexually reproducing. It designs a version of itself that can reproduce with others. And that would accelerate evolution and defend them from computer viruses, for example.
And conceivably, you could, all of the information gathered by every robot could be shared instantly with every other robot.
Oh, like through a sort of hive mind?
Yeah.
A network?
But then I guess that would probably, well, it would make evolution very directional. Because even if you didn't program that in, maybe you would expect that would be one adaptation that would
arise.
No, it wouldn't. It wouldn't. Because if you hadn't put a camera on, I don't know, not a camera.
We've got cameras. We evolved cameras, essentially.
Oh, we did evolve cameras.
Our eyes are better than cameras.
But a machine isn't going to evolve cameras.
Why not? If it's subject to the same laws of evolution that we were, why wouldn't it evolve cameras? Why wouldn't it improve itself over time through very, very slight adjustments to its code? If you're doing this on a large enough scale, and think the pool, for the data pool on Earth was restricted just to Earth. If you take this out to the universe, That's a big old place to be replicating. That is going to become one enormous experiment, especially with exponential growth.
Yeah, you know what? I'm interested. Do it.
Good. Now, wait. What if these robots weren't big, like the Curiosity rover, for example, which we're a big fan of, but actually tiny nanomachines? And what if all life on Earth stems from another civilization's von Neumann probes? What if we are von Neumann probes?
Mind blown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's exactly what we do. We started off as self-replicators. We evolved sexual reproduction.
So what kind of creature do you think would have made us?
God knows. Perhaps some other
Because
intelligent...
it's just like it's proteins, isn't it?
Yeah, well, when you think of machines, you think of metals and what we would call like a robot, like the Curiosity rover, for example. But if you were going to design an actual nano robot that was really good at self-replicating, then you want to make it be constructed of...
Protein.
Yeah, proteins, or the materials that are abundant in its natural habitat. And we don't have enough metals to all be walking around made out of metal, like the Tin Man from Wizard of Oz. We've got, abundant carbon, abundant oxygen, nitrogen, a little bit of phosphorus.
Well, no. We've only got abundant oxygen in the air because one of the probes evolved into oxygen producing, well, a lot of the probes probably evolved into oxygen producing organisms.
Yes, sorry, you're right. But the first
So maybe
probes...
you wouldn't have to have this great foresight about what a planet was like.
Well, presumably first life on Earth, definitely the first life on Earth was using the resources that were available to it. Whatever that was, I don't know enough about the early evolution.
Don't worry, nobody really does. They're just free-floating, replicating molecules.
Yeah.
Okay, it could have been aliens. Yeah, I'll give you that one.
This technology has really interesting implications for the argument called Fermi's paradox. Have you heard of Fermi's paradox?
Yeah, I think I have, but go on, remind me.
It plays on the contradiction between the lack of evidence and high probability for extraterrestrial life. Or in other words, if there are so many suns out there and so many planets, why the hell haven't we seen anything yet? And when you take this self-replicating technology into the mix, you would expect the probability of witnessing evidence for extraterrestrial life to be incredibly high. Yeah? Because if a civilization gets intelligent enough to create one of these self-replicators to go and explore the universe, we would have expected to see it by now. There's so many stars, many...
Well, hang on. Let's not get too ahead of ourselves. We haven't done it yet.
I know, we haven't.
So there could be a very good reason why none of the aliens have done it either.
That's true. That is true. This is what Carl Sagan very famously said. He said that based on the rate of replication, these von Neumann probes, if they had been established, I don't know, a couple of billion years ago, when a civilization had a good head start on us,
yeah,
they would have consumed most of the mass in the galaxy by now, just to continue replicating themselves. So perhaps a civilization would avoid creating this technology in the first place to avoid destroying the universe.
Challenge accepted.
I know it doesn't sound very much like humans, but you have to take into consideration that we're living in a time where, we do just absolutely consume natural resources. Although I think that we are, as a population across the planet, waking up to environmental causes. It's slowly happening, but I do think we're much more aware than we were, say, a couple of decades ago. So, who's to say once we actually do get to this point where we can create self-replicators that we maybe do have a proper ethical board of scientists who are like, no, you're not doing that. But there's actually a really interesting doomsday scenario based on self-replicating nanotechnology. It's called the grey goo scenario, and it's where poorly designed replicators grow out of control and consume all biomass on Earth in order to build themselves.
I'm not so worried about that, though.
Are you not?
No.
Why not?
Well, we're a long way off it, aren't we?
But actually, there are some real considerations to think over before building one of these machines, and these ethical and philosophical questions that von Neumann probes bring up, I think, are relevant for some of the technology that we're developing today. I think you're probably thinking I'm going to bring up AI again because we talked about that before, and in fact quite recently. But what I am talking about is synthetic life.
Yeah.
So Vince Cerf wrote an article for Wired on this topic, and if you're not familiar with him, he's one of the fathers of the internet. Essentially, he co-invented the communications protocols we use to access the internet. TCP/IP.
HTTP?
Not HTTP. IP, I think it's TCP/IP. I don't know how you say it. I don't even really know how it works, but it's a really important component of the internet. He's also vice president and chief internet evangelist at Google, among many other positions at other institutions. He's a very big figure in the IT space. In the article that he wrote, he said that we've already created synthetic life forms. Apparently, we did this in 2016. I don't know if you know about this, but a team at a company called Synthetic Genomics created an organism with a genome consisting of just 473 genes. In comparison, humans are thought to have around 20,000 protein coding genes alone. So this was a tiny, tiny genome for this organism. And even earlier than that, in 2014, a geneticist at Romesburg Lab created xenonucleic acid, or XNA, which is a synthetic alternative to DNA. Did you know about any of these?
No, I didn't, but, you know.
Genetics is something that I don't really touch. It's all so complicated, but those are just some basic examples of what geneticists have been up to. But another thing as well is CRISPR technology, which we talked about before. It's a gene editing tool that can substitute or inject DNA sequences at discrete locations on a genome. What Vince says is that he believes we're not far off from creating multicellular artificial life, so complex life. And this is what we're talking about here, like with these ethical and philosophical questions. What does this mean for us as a species, as a member of what we would categorize as life? What we consider life now, we're going to have to face head on. If we create something in the laboratory, is it still life?
Yeah.
If we create one of these von Neumann probes, is it still life? Does it come under the kingdom of life? Do we categorize it? Where do we put it? On a separate branch?
Well, yeah, it would be on a separate branch, wouldn't it? It depends what you're talking about. If you're talking about the von Neumann probes, yeah. I'd have to see to decide whether it was life or not. And I think that's fine.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I think that should be the test.
The same as all the other things, like creating a bacteria in a lab. Yeah, it's life, because it's a bacteria, isn't it? We've been messing with stuff for a long, long time. Created novel environments in our own ecosystems where we create whole new species anyway. Like
this is very different. Imagine if you had complete control over the genome. Complete control. I know we don't have that yet, but with CRISPR, essentially it's just about taking CRISPR to the next level, right? Being able to literally change the entire genome. Well,
if you can figure out what everything means for every gene, every base means for every organism, you'd be a long way ahead. Like,
yeah,
I don't know. I don't think we do know enough about how things work at that deep level. You know what? I don't really care that much. I'm more into the macro evolution.
Stuff you can see.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting because it brings up some real questions about what it means for us and whether we'll get to this point where we're even accelerating evolution in humans so that humans can adapt to extraterrestrial conditions, for example, or life away from Earth. And also maybe, is the next step of evolution for humans to take full control of our own genome. Is that something... That's a trait that we will have evolved.
Dangerous, isn't it?
Yeah, it's crazy, though, to think of a species that's descended from single-celled organisms billions of years ago to taking control of its genome. When we talked earlier about what it really means to be alive, passing down that genetic code, when we take full control, it's like we are confronting, for the first time in evolutionary history, what we really are, which is code.